poor Maid was kicked out with nothing, but the wealthiest CEO in Hudson stopped when he saw her. Her bare feet touched the cold pavement for the first time in 3 years, and with nothing but the torn uniform on her back. Cecilia Williams faced a freedom that felt more terrifying than the prison she'd just escaped. Before we get deep into the story, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this story, because tomorrow I have another beautiful story to share with you, and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Now, let's get into the story. The pre-dawn darkness of Hudson City carried the weight of secrets, and none heavier than those locked behind the pristine doors of 47 Maple Street. Inside the sprawling colonial mansion, Cecilia Williams moved through her morning routine with the practiced silence of someone who had learned that visibility meant danger. Her calloused hands, once soft and graceful back in Port of Spain, wrapped around the mop handle as she cleaned the marble floors for the 3rd time this week. 3 years. 3 years since Ricardo Mendoza had promised her family a better life in America, since she'd trusted the wrong person and found herself trapped in a nightmare disguised as opportunity. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 5 a.m., its sound echoing through the house like a warning. Cecilia quickened her pace, knowing that Mr. Hendricks would be stirring soon, and when he woke, the day's torment would begin anew. She caught her reflection in the polished surface of the dining room table. 26 years old, but her eyes held the weariness of someone twice her age. "You're not supposed to exist," she whispered to her reflection, repeating the words Hendricks had drilled into her head since day one. No social security number, no identification, no legal status. She was a ghost in America's machine, invisible by design. The sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs sent ice through her veins. Too early. Hendricks was awake too early, and that meant Cecilia. His voice boomed through the house, slurred with the remnants of last night's whiskey. "Get up here. Now." Her heart hammered against her ribs as she climbed the mahogany staircase, each step taking her closer to a confrontation she'd been dreading for months. Hendricks stood at the top of the landing in his silk robe, his grey hair disheveled, his bloodshot eyes scanning her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "3 years I've fed you, housed you, kept you safe," he said, stepping closer. The smell of alcohol and something darker, something predatory, filled the space between them. "Don't you think it's time you showed some gratitude? Mr. Hendricks, I clean your house, I cook your meals, That's not what I'm talking about." His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with surprising strength for a man in his 60s. "You're a beautiful woman, Cecilia. And you're wasting away up there in that attic room, all alone." The words she'd been rehearsing for months finally found their voice. "No." The simple word hung in the air like a challenge, and she watched his face transform from predatory confidence to dangerous anger. His grip tightened, and she could feel her pulse throbbing against his fingers. "Excuse me?" "I said no." Stronger this time, her grandmother's voice echoing in her memory. "You are a daughter of warriors, child. Remember that." Meanwhile, across the city in the penthouse suite of King's Tower, Marcus King stood before floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sun paint Hudson's skyline in shades of gold and amber. At 34, he commanded an empire worth billions, but success had come with a price. Isolation that money couldn't cure and a loneliness that luxury couldn't fill. His phone buzzed with the day's first crisis. A merger in Tokyo needed his attention. Stocks in London were fluctuating. A factory in Mexico required oversight. The world never stopped demanding pieces of him, and he'd given them willingly, trading his humanity for power one decision at a time. "Your car is ready, Mr. Kings." His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Marcus straightened his Italian silk tie and grabbed his briefcase, preparing for another day of ruling his kingdom from behind bulletproof glass. The armored limousine waited in the building's private garage, its engine purring with quiet authority. As they pulled onto Hudson's empty streets, Marcus allowed himself a moment of stillness, watching the city wake up through tinted windows. He'd built his empire on the principle that problems could be solved with enough money and influence. But lately, a nagging emptiness had been growing in his chest, a sense that all his success meant nothing if it only served himself. The limousine glided through Hudson's wealthy district, past mansions that housed the city's elite, past perfectly manicured lawns that hid perfectly curated secrets. Marcus barely noticed the scenery anymore. It was all background noise to the constant calculations running through his mind. That's when he saw her. Back at 47 Maple Street, the confrontation had escalated beyond words. Hendrik's other hand had found her shoulder, his grip bruising as he tried to pull her toward his bedroom. But 3 years of suppressed anger and desperation had finally reached their breaking point. "I said a no." Cecilia twisted away from him, her elbow connecting with his ribs hard enough to make him stumble backward. "You little." Hendricks lunged forward, but Cecilia was ready this time. Her knee found its target, and he doubled over with a howl of pain and rage. "I'm done," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I'm done being your prisoner. I'm done being afraid." Hendricks straightened slowly, his face twisted with fury. "You ungrateful bitch. You think you can fight me? You're nothing. You don't even exist in this country. Then you won't mind if I leave." The words surprised even her, but once spoken, they felt like truth. Hendricks smiled, a cold, cruel expression that chilled her blood. "Leave?" He laughed. "With what? You have nothing. No money, no papers, no family. You'll be dead or arrested within hours." He moved toward the phone on his nightstand. "Maybe I should call my friends at IC right now. Let them know about the illegal immigrant who's been hiding in my house." But Cecilia was already moving, her feet carrying her down the stairs with a speed born of pure survival instinct. She heard him shouting behind her, heard his heavy footsteps on the stairs, but she didn't stop. She burst through the front door and into the pre-dawn air, her lungs burning as they filled with the first free breath she'd taken in 3 years. "Get back here." Hendricks appeared in the doorway, still in his robe, his face purple with rage. "You'll come crawling back. You have nowhere to go." But Cecilia was already running, her bare feet slapping against the cold pavement as she fled down Maple Street. She had no destination, no plan, no hope. Just the desperate need to put distance between herself and the nightmare she'd finally escaped. She ran until her lungs screamed for air, until her legs could no longer carry her, until she collapsed on a bus stop bench 6 blocks away. Only then did the full weight of her situation hit her. Hendricks was right, she had nothing. No money, no identification, no legal status, no friends or family in America. The torn maid's uniform was all she owned in the world. The morning sun was fully up now, and Hudson was coming alive around her. Commuters hurried past without seeing her, their problems too important to notice one more broken person on the city's margins. Cecilia pulled her knees to her chest and tried to make herself invisible, just as she'd learned to do over the past 3 years. That's when the black limousine appeared. It moved slowly down the street, its tinted windows reflecting the morning light like dark mirrors. Most cars would have passed without slowing, but this one began to decelerate as it approached her bench. Cecilia tensed, ready to run again if necessary. Was it Hendricks? Had he called someone to drag her back? The limousine stopped completely, its engine idling with quiet power. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the rear window began to lower, revealing a face that Cecilia recognized from newspapers and billboards throughout the city. Marcus King stared at her through the open window, his grey eyes taking in her torn uniform, her bare feet, her obvious desperation. He should have told his driver to keep moving. He had a board meeting in 20 minutes, 3 conference calls scheduled before noon, and a dinner with investors that could determine the future of his company. Instead, he found himself saying the words that would change both their lives forever. "Are you hurt? What do you think will happen when two people from completely different worlds meet at their most vulnerable moment? Let me know in the comments below. The question hung in the air between them like a bridge neither knew how to cross. Cecilia stared at the man in the limousine, Marcus Kings, whose face graced the covers of business magazines, whose name was whispered in boardrooms across the country with equal parts admiration and fear. Up close, he was younger than she'd expected, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that seemed to see too much. "Are you hurt?" he asked again, softer this time, as if he understood that loud voices might send her running. Cecilia's instinct was to lie, to say she was fine and disappear before this moment could complicate her already impossible situation. But something in his tone, a gentleness that seemed at odds with his reputation, made her hesitate. She looked down at her bare feet, at the torn hem of her uniform, at her hands still shaking from adrenaline. "I don't know." Marcus leaned forward slightly, and she caught a glimpse of the limousine's interior. Leather seats that probably cost more than most people made in a year, a small bar with crystal glasses, technology she couldn't begin to identify. It was a world so far removed from her reality that it might as well have been on another planet. "My name is Marcus," he said, as if she might not recognize him. "What's yours?" The simple question felt like a trap. What name could she give? She'd spent 3 years being told she didn't exist, that she was less than human. But something about this moment, sitting on a bus stop bench with nothing left to lose, made honesty feel like the only option left. Cecilia Williams. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Cecilia." He repeated her name like he was testing how it felt. "You're shivering." She was. The morning air was cooler than she'd realized, and the thin fabric of her uniform offered little protection. But the shivering wasn't just from cold. It was from shock, from fear, from the sudden realization that she was having a conversation with one of the most powerful men in America, while sitting on a street corner like a discarded piece of furniture. Marcus reached for something inside the limousine, and Cecilia tensed, ready to bolt. But all he pulled out was a black suit jacket, expensive looking, perfectly tailored, still warm from his body heat. "Here." He held it out to her through the window. "You don't have to take it, but you look cold." The gesture was so unexpected, so human, that Cecilia felt tears threatening for the first time since fleeing Hendrik's house. She stared at the jacket, at his outstretched hand, at the genuine concern in his eyes. "Why?" The word escaped before she could stop it. "Why what? Why are you?" She gestured helplessly at the scene. Him in his limousine, her on the bench, the jacket bridging the impossible distance between their worlds. "You don't know me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Cecilia wondered if she'd overstepped some invisible boundary. Rich people probably didn't expect questions from people like her. But when he spoke, his voice carried something she hadn't expected, uncertainty. "Maybe that's exactly why," he said. "When you know everyone, when every conversation is about what they want from you or what you can give them." He trailed off, then shook his head. "I don't know. You just looked like you needed someone to ask if you were okay." Cecilia reached for the jacket with trembling fingers, and for a moment their hands brushed as she took it. His skin was warm, soft in a way that spoke of a life without calluses or scars. The jacket was impossibly soft, lined with silk that felt like a whisper against her skin. It smelled like expensive cologne and something else, something clean and masculine that made her heart do an unexpected flutter. "Thank you," she whispered, pulling the jacket tight around her shoulders. It was far too big, the sleeves covering her hands completely, but it felt like armor against the world. Marcus's driver, a large man with kind eyes and graying temples, caught his boss's attention in the rearview mirror. "Mr. Kings, your 9 o'clock is in 15 minutes. Cancel it," Marcus said without taking his eyes off Cecilia. "Sir." "Cancel all my meetings this morning, James. Something more important has come up." Cecilia's breath caught. "No, you don't have to. Have you eaten?" Marcus interrupted gently. The question hit her like a physical blow. When had she last eaten? Yesterday morning, maybe? Hendricks controlled every aspect of her life, including when and what she ate. The constant hunger had become so normal, she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to have a full stomach. Her silence was answer enough. Marcus opened the limousine door and stepped out onto the sidewalk. He was tall, taller than she'd expected, and moved with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about belonging anywhere. His charcoal grey suit was perfectly pressed, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. He looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine, while she probably looked like she'd crawled out of a dumpster. "There's a diner 2 blocks from here," he said, extending his hand toward her. "Good coffee, better pancakes. My treat." Cecilia stared at his outstretched hand like it might bite her. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I'm an illegal immigrant. Because I have no papers, no identification, no right to exist in this country. Because powerful men like you don't buy breakfast for people like me without wanting something in return. Because this feels too good to be true, and in my experience, things that seem too good to be true usually are." But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she whispered, "Because I don't understand why you're being kind to me." Marcus lowered his hand, but didn't step back. "Maybe kindness doesn't always need a reason. In my experience, everything needs a reason." "What's your experience been?" The question was asked so gently, with such genuine curiosity, that Cecilia felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. She'd spent 3 years perfecting the art of invisibility, of being present but not seen, useful but not noticed. But sitting here on this bench, wrapped in his jacket, she felt more visible than she had in years. "Not good," she said finally. Marcus nodded slowly, as if he understood more than she'd said. "Mine hasn't been all good either, if that helps." Cecilia looked up at him, really looked, and for the first time noticed the shadows under his eyes, the tension around his mouth, the way his shoulders seemed to carry an invisible weight. Here was a man who had everything money could buy, and yet— "You're sad," she said before she could stop herself. The observation seemed to surprise him. "What makes you say that?" "Your eyes. They're the same as mine." They looked at each other in silence, 2 damaged people recognizing something familiar in each other's brokenness. The morning traffic moved around them. The city continued its relentless pace, but in this moment they existed in a bubble of understanding that transcended their different worlds. "The diner," Marcus said finally. "No strings attached. Just 2 people having breakfast. If you want to leave after that, I'll have James drive you anywhere you want to go." Cecilia knew she should say no. Every survival instinct she'd developed over the past 3 years was screaming at her to run, to not trust this impossible kindness. But she was so tired of running, so tired of being afraid, so tired of being hungry and alone and invisible. "Okay," she whispered. Marcus's smile was small but genuine. "Okay." The Sunrise Diner was exactly what its name suggested. A cheerful, unpretentious place where the coffee was strong and the food was honest. As they walked the 2 blocks from the bus stop, Cecilia was hyper-aware of the looks they attracted. Marcus King's walking down a public street was unusual enough, but Marcus King's walking beside a woman in a torn Maid's uniform and his suit jacket was practically unprecedented. She tried to give the jacket back before they entered the diner, but he waved her off. "Keep it," he said. "It looks better on you anyway." The diner was busy with the morning rush. Construction workers grabbing coffee before their shifts, office workers picking up breakfast sandwiches, retirees meeting for their daily dose of gossip and eggs. The hostess, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and tired feet, didn't seem to recognize Marcus or judge Cecilia's appearance. "2 for breakfast?" she asked cheerfully. "Please," Marcus said. "Somewhere quiet if you have it." They were seated in a corner booth with red vinyl seats and a view of the street. Marcus slid into his seat with practiced ease, but Cecilia perched on the edge of hers like she might need to run at any moment. "Relax," Marcus said gently. "You're safe here." "How do you know?" "Because I won't let anything happen to you." The words were said with such quiet certainty that Cecilia almost believed them. She looked around the diner, taking in the mismatched chairs, the faded photographs on the walls, the smell of bacon and coffee, and something that might have been hope. When was the last time she'd been in a public place? When was the last time she'd sat in a restaurant and ordered food like a normal person? What would you do if someone showed you unexpected kindness when you needed it most? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your stories. "Tell me about yourself," Marcus said when the waitress had taken their order. Pancakes and coffee for both of them, though Cecilia had needed several minutes to even process the concept of choosing what she wanted to eat. The request sent panic through her system. Tell him about herself? Where would she even begin? With the lies Ricardo had told her family back in Trinidad? With the promises of legitimate work that had turned into 3 years of captivity? With the sexual assault she'd narrowly escaped just hours ago? "There's not much to tell," she said, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug like it was an anchor. "I doubt that's true." "What about you?" she deflected. "I mean, everyone knows about you. Marcus King's the king of Hudson." She tried to smile, to make it light, but the expression felt foreign on her face. Marcus's laugh was dry, humorless. "Yeah, that's me. The king of Hudson. Master of the universe. Ruler of absolutely nothing that matters." The bitterness in his voice surprised her. "You built an empire. I built a cage." He took a sip of his coffee, staring out the window at the street beyond. "Prettier than most cages, maybe, but still a cage. But you can leave whenever you want." "Can I?" He looked back at her, and she saw something raw in his expression. When you have 50,000 employees depending on you, when entire communities exist because of decisions you make, when every choice you've ever made has been about building something bigger and more powerful, can you really just walk away? Cecilia had never thought about wealth as a prison before. In her world, money meant freedom. The freedom to choose where to live, what to eat, whether to stay or go. But looking at Marcus now, she began to understand that some cages were built from gold instead of iron. "At least you chose your cage," she said quietly. The words hung between them, and Marcus's eyes sharpened with sudden attention. "What do you mean?" Before Cecilia could answer, her blood ran cold. Through the diner's front window, she saw a familiar figure on the sidewalk. Ricardo Mendoza, the man who had brought her to America, the man who had sold her to Hendrix like a piece of property. He was standing across the street, talking on his phone, his eyes scanning the area like a predator searching for prey. "I have to go." Cecilia stood so abruptly that she knocked over her coffee, the hot liquid spreading across the table in a dark stain. "Cecilia, what's wrong?" But she was already moving, panic overriding rational thought. She couldn't let Ricardo see her, couldn't let him drag her back to Hendrix or worse. She headed for the back of the diner, looking for another exit, anywhere to run. Marcus was beside her in an instant, his hand gentle but firm on her arm. Hey, what's happening? Talk to me." "I can't." She was hyperventilating now, her vision starting to tunnel. "He'll find me. He'll take me back." "Who will take you back?" She couldn't answer, couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the raw terror flooding her system. 3 years of conditioning took over. Run, hide, disappear. Don't let them catch you. Marcus guided her to an empty booth in the back corner, his movements careful and non-threatening. "Look at me, Cecilia. Just look at me." She forced herself to meet his eyes, found them steady and calm, and absolutely focused on her. "You're safe," he said firmly. "Whatever happened to you, whoever hurt you, they can't reach you here. I promise you that. You don't understand. Then help me understand." His voice was gentle but urgent. "Let me help you." Cecilia looked into his eyes and saw something she'd forgotten existed. Someone who genuinely wanted to protect her without asking for anything in return. It was so foreign, so unexpected, that it broke something loose inside her chest. "I'm not supposed to be here," she whispered. "In America. I don't have papers. I don't have anything. I was." She struggled to find words that could contain the horror of the past 3 years. "I was kept. Like a prisoner. And the man outside, he's the one who—" "Okay." Marcus's voice was deadly calm now, and Cecilia could see something changing in his expression. A hardness that transformed him from gentle businessman to something far more dangerous. "Okay. We're going to handle this." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "James, I need you to check for anyone suspicious around the diner. Hispanic male, approximately 5'10", dark hair, probably wearing a suit." "Yes, take pictures if you can do it discreetly." "No, don't approach him, just observe." Cecilia stared at him. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done the moment I saw you on that bench," Marcus said grimly. "I'm protecting you." James's voice crackled through Marcus's phone 5 minutes later. "Found him, sir. Male suspect matching your description. Currently positioned across the street. He's been making phone calls and watching the diner entrance." "Should I?" "Keep watching," Marcus said quietly, his eyes never leaving Cecilia's face. "Don't let him see you, but don't lose him either." Cecilia had grown very still, like a deer sensing a predator nearby. Her hands were clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white, and Marcus could see the rapid pulse at her throat. Every instinct told him to demand answers, to take control of the situation the way he controlled everything else in his life. But something about her fragility made him force himself to wait. "How long have you been in America?" he asked gently. 3 years. The words came out as a whisper. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. The precision of her answer told him everything he needed to know about how closely she'd been counting. "And this man outside, Ricardo, he brought you here?" Cecilia's laugh was bitter, broken. "He promised my family I'd have a good job, that I'd be able to send money home to help with my grandmother's medical bills. He showed us papers, documents that looked official. He said I'd work as a nanny for a wealthy American family." Marcus felt something cold and hard settling in his chest. He'd heard stories like this before, had even donated money to organizations that fought human trafficking. But hearing it from Cecilia, seeing the pain etched into every line of her face, made it real in a way that statistics never could. But instead, he took my passport the moment we landed. Said it was for safekeeping. Then he drove me to Hendricks' house and told me I owed him $15,000 for my passage to America. Her voice was steady now, clinical, as if she was reciting facts about someone else's life. $15,000 plus interest, plus room and board, plus the cost of food and clothing. The debt kept growing no matter how much work I did. "Debt bondage," Marcus said grimly. "It's illegal under federal law." "Is it?" Cecilia looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. Because for 3 years, no one seemed to care about what was legal. The accusation hit him like a physical blow. She was right, of course. People like him, wealthy, powerful, insulated, lived in a world where they could pretend such horrors didn't exist in their own backyards. He'd written checks to charity and told himself he was making a difference, never thinking to look closer to home. "You're right," he said simply. "And I'm sorry." The apology seemed to surprise her. "You didn't know." "I should have known. We all should have known." Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from James. "Target is moving. Heading east toward black sedan parked on Oak Street." "He's leaving," Marcus told Cecilia, watching the tension drain from her shoulders. "But that doesn't mean you're safe. If he's looking for you." "He is." Cecilia closed her eyes. "Hendricks probably called him the moment I ran. They own me, as far as they're concerned. I'm property." The word property, spoken in her soft Trinidad accent, made Marcus's jaw clench with suppressed fury. "Not anymore. You don't understand how this works. Cecilia opened her eyes, and Marcus saw decades of fear reflected there. These people have connections everywhere. They have lawyers, they have money, they have politicians in their pockets. What do I have? No papers, no legal status, no family here. If they find me, they won't. How can you be so sure? Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to a tone that had closed billion-dollar deals and intimidated boardrooms full of powerful men. Because now you have something you didn't have before. What? Me? The simple declaration hung between them, and Cecilia felt something she'd forgotten existed stirring in her chest. Hope. But hope was dangerous. Hope had gotten her into this mess in the first place. Why? She asked. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the street where Ricardo had been standing. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. Because 5 years ago, my sister was killed by a drunk driver. The words came out flat, emotionless. Elena was 23, brilliant, about to start medical school. She was going to save the world, one patient at a time. Cecilia's breath caught. Marcus, I'm so. The driver was never prosecuted. He continued as if she hadn't spoken. His family had connections, money, influence. The case disappeared into bureaucratic limbo, and Elena became just another statistic. His hands clenched into fists on the table. I built my empire partly because I promised myself I'd never be powerless like that again. But what's the point of having all this power if I don't use it to help people who need it? The raw pain in his voice made Cecilia's heart ache. Here was a man who had everything, and yet had lost the thing that mattered most. She understood that kind of loss, that kind of powerlessness. In some ways, they weren't so different after all. I'm sorry about your sister, she said softly. And I'm sorry about what they did to you. Marcus met her eyes. But we can't change the past. We can only decide what we do next. In your darkest moments, have you ever had someone choose to stand with you when they could have walked away? Tell me about it in the comments. Your story might inspire someone who needs hope today. Before Cecilia could respond, the diner's bell chimed as someone entered. Both of them looked up instinctively, and Cecilia's blood turned to ice. It wasn't Ricardo, but she recognized the man anyway. Tall, thin, with dead eyes and a scar running from his left ear to his jaw. Miguel Santos, one of Ricardo's enforcers. The man who had once beaten another girl so badly she'd spent 2 weeks in Hendrik's basement, recovering from her lesson about obedience. Miguel's eyes swept the diner methodically, and Cecilia knew the moment he spotted her. His lips curved into a smile that made her stomach turn. We need to leave, she whispered urgently. Now. Marcus followed her gaze and immediately understood. He threw 2 20s on the table and stood, his body positioning itself between Cecilia and the man who was now walking toward their booth. Back exit? Marcus asked quietly. Kitchen, Cecilia breathed. They moved toward the back of the diner, trying to look casual, but Miguel was already cutting off their path. He slid into the booth directly behind theirs, close enough that Cecilia could smell his cologne, the same sickly sweet scent that had haunted her nightmares for 3 years. Cecilia, Miguel said in Spanish, his voice carrying just far enough for her to hear. Ricardo is very disappointed in you. Mr. Hendricks is very angry. They sent me to bring you home. Cecilia's whole body began to shake, and Marcus could feel the terror radiating from her in waves. He'd spent years in boardrooms with sharks and predators, but this was different. This was personal. She's not going anywhere, Marcus said quietly, turning to face Miguel. Miguel's dead eyes shifted to Marcus, taking in the expensive suit, the confident posture, the obvious wealth. And you are? Someone who's going to be a problem for you if you don't leave. Now. Miguel laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Big words from a rich man. But you don't understand what you're dealing with here, senor. This girl belongs to us. She has debts to pay. The only debt here, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, is the one you and your friends are going to pay to society. Something shifted in Miguel's expression, a flicker of uncertainty. You should be careful, rich man. Accidents happen to people who interfere in things that don't concern them. Is that a threat? It's friendly advice. Marcus smiled then, and it was the same smile that had intimidated Fortune 500 CEOs and made stock prices fluctuate with a single raised eyebrow. Here's some friendly advice for you. I own half this city. I have judges, prosecutors, and police commissioners on speed dial. And right now, you're sitting in a public place threatening a victim of human trafficking while I record every word. He held up his phone, the screen clearly showing an active recording. Miguel's face went white. So here's what's going to happen, Marcus continued conversationally. You're going to walk out of this diner and disappear. If I see you, or any of your associates near Cecilia again, I'll make sure every law enforcement agency in the country knows exactly who you are and what you do for a living. Miguel stared at him for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he stood, but not before leaning close enough to whisper in Cecilia's ear. This isn't over, Mija. We know where you are now, and Rich Boy can't protect you forever. He walked out without another word, leaving behind the lingering scent of threat and violence. Cecilia was shaking so hard she could barely stand, and Marcus gently guided her back to their booth. He's right, she whispered. You can't protect me forever, and now they know you're involved. They'll come after you too. Let them try. Marcus's voice was steel wrapped in silk. I've been looking for a real fight for years. This isn't a business deal, Marcus. These people kill anyone who gets in their way. Then we'd better make sure they don't get the chance. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Detective Rodriguez? It's Marcus Kings. Yes, I know it's been a while. I need to see you. Today. It's about human trafficking. What do you mean, which case? How many cases are there? As he spoke, Cecilia watched this man, who had been a stranger just hours ago, systematically mobilize resources she couldn't have imagined. With a few phone calls, he was setting wheels in motion that could change everything. Rodriguez is one of the good ones, Marcus explained after ending the call. She's been investigating trafficking networks for years, but she says the cases keep getting buried or reassigned. Apparently, someone with serious influence has been protecting these operations. Of course they have, Cecilia said bitterly. How do you think people like Hendricks operate for years without consequences? They have protection. Not anymore. Marcus's eyes were hard as winter stone. I'm going to introduce Detective Rodriguez to some of my friends in the Justice Department, and my friends in the media, and my friends in Congress. Why? The question burst out of her before she could stop it. Why are you doing all this? A few hours ago, you didn't even know I existed. Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying her face as if memorizing it. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before. Because you fought back, he said simply. When that man tried to assault you, when you had every reason to just submit and survive, you fought back. Do you know how rare that kind of courage is? I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Cecilia. It's acting in spite of fear. He reached across the table, his fingers barely brushing hers. And because when I saw you on that bench, something in me recognized something in you. We're both prisoners, just in different kinds of cages. The touch of his fingers against hers sent electricity up her arm. When was the last time someone had touched her gently? When was the last time a touch had meant comfort instead of threat? What happens now? She asked. Now we fight back, Marcus said. Together. As if summoned by his words, Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed Detective Rodriguez's name. That was fast, Marcus said, answering the call. What do you have for me, Detective? Cecilia watched his expression change as he listened, saw his jaw tighten and his eyes grow cold. How long have you known about this? He asked grimly. And why hasn't it been shut down? I see. No, Detective. I think you misunderstand. I'm not asking for a favor. I'm offering to give you the resources to do your job properly. Yes, that's exactly what I mean. He ended the call and looked at Cecilia with an expression that was equal parts fury and determination. What did she say? Cecilia asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. She says Hendrik's operation is small compared to what they've uncovered. There's a network bringing people up from Mexico and the Caribbean, children, women, men, for forced labor, sexual exploitation, and drug running. Dozens of victims, maybe hundreds. His voice was tight with controlled rage. And every time Rodriguez gets close to making arrests, the case gets reassigned or the evidence disappears. Cecilia felt the blood drain from her face. How many others are there? People like me? Too many. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. But Rodriguez thinks with the right backing, political protection, media attention, resources for a proper investigation, they could bring down the entire network. And you want to give her that backing. I want to do more than that. Marcus leaned forward, his grey eyes blazing with purpose. I want to help you destroy them, Cecilia. All of them. Starting with Hendrik's and working our way up the chain until we find whoever's running this operation. Cecilia stared at him, seeing the transformation from isolated billionaire to determined crusader. This was a man who had built an empire through sheer force of will, and now he was turning that will toward justice. It's dangerous, she warned. If they realize we're working against them, then we'd better be very careful, Marcus said. And very smart. And very fast. Outside, storm clouds were gathering over Hudson, promising rain before evening. But for the first time in 3 years, Cecilia felt like the storm might finally wash away the nightmare that had consumed her life. Okay, she said quietly. Let's do it. The next 72 hours moved like a carefully choreographed dance between hope and terror. Marcus had moved Cecilia into a secure suite at the Meridian Hotel, one of his properties, with armed security and a panic room disguised as a luxury bathroom. She'd never lived anywhere so beautiful, but the golden cage felt familiar in all the wrong ways. Detective Carmen Rodriguez arrived at the hotel that evening, a compact woman with intelligent eyes and the kind of weariness that came from fighting battles no one wanted to acknowledge. She spread files across the marble coffee table in Marcus's suite, each folder representing a life destroyed by the network they were hunting. This is what we know, Rodriguez said, opening the first file. The operation runs through at least 6 states, with the primary hub here in Hudson. They bring people up from Trinidad, Jamaica, Mexico, Guatemala, anywhere poverty makes people desperate enough to believe promises of legitimate work. Cecilia stared at the photographs, faces that could have been her own, stories that mirrored her experience. How long has this been going on? At least 8 years that we can prove. Probably longer. Rodriguez's voice was grim. The victims work in private homes, illegal factories, agricultural operations. Some are forced into prostitution. The children. She closed that particular file without opening it. Let's focus on what we can prove. Marcus had been unusually quiet, studying the files with the same intensity he brought to corporate acquisitions. Who's protecting them? Someone this connected doesn't operate without high-level cover. Rodriguez exchanged a look with her partner, Detective James Liu, who had been silent until now. That's where it gets complicated, Liu said. We've traced payments to accounts linked to city council members, state representatives, even federal immigration officials. Names, Marcus said flatly. We can't. Detective, I'm not asking as a curious citizen. I'm asking as someone who's about to fund the largest private investigation in this city's history. Marcus's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to getting answers. I need to know who we're fighting. Rodriguez pulled out a tablet and showed him a network diagram that looked like a spider web of corruption. Judge Patricia Clearwater has dismissed at least 12 trafficking cases in the past 3 years. Immigration Officer David Chun has been flagging potential raids in advance. State Representative Michael Torres has blocked legislation that would strengthen trafficking penalties. Cecilia felt sick as she recognized some of the names. Hendricks had bragged about his friends in important places, but seeing the scope of it mapped out was overwhelming. "It's too big," she whispered. "How do we fight something this big?" Marcus turned to her, and she saw something fierce and protective blazing in his grey eyes. "The same way you brought down a mountain back home in Trinidad, one stone at a time." "How did you?" "I had my people research Trinidad's geography and culture," Marcus said gently. "I wanted to understand where you came from. Your island is volcanic, built from the ground up through persistence and pressure. Just like what we're going to do to these bastards." The fact that he'd taken time to learn about her homeland, that he'd cared enough to understand her background, sent warmth through Cecilia's chest that had nothing to do with the hotel's heating system. "What's the plan?" she asked. Rodriguez leaned forward. "We need evidence. Real evidence, not just witness testimony that can be discredited. Financial records, communications, documentation of the trafficking pipeline." "I can get you into Hendricks' house," Cecilia said quietly. "I know his schedule, his security systems, where he keeps his files." "Absolutely not." Marcus's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "You're not going anywhere near that place. It's the only way. It's suicide." Marcus stood and began pacing, his carefully controlled composure finally cracking. "You think I'm going to let you walk back into that house after what he tried to do to you?" "This isn't your decision to make," Cecilia said, standing to face him. "This is my fight, Marcus. My life. My choice." "Your choice?" Marcus turned on her, his eyes blazing. "You think I can just stand by and watch you put yourself in danger? You think I can just—" He stopped abruptly, as if realizing what he'd been about to say. The silence stretched between them, charged with unspoken emotions. Rodriguez and Lou exchanged meaningful looks and quietly moved to the far side of the suite, giving them privacy. "What?" Cecilia asked softly. "You can just what?" Marcus ran his hands through his hair, destroying its perfect styling. "You think I can just watch the woman I'm falling in love with walk into a trap?" The words hung in the air like a confession of some terrible crime. Cecilia felt her heart stop, restart, then begin racing so fast she felt dizzy. "You barely know me," she whispered. "I know enough." Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "I know you're brave enough to fight back when someone tries to hurt you. I know you count days like a prisoner marking time. I know you've been hungry for so long you're afraid to believe food will still be there tomorrow. I know your grandmother taught you that you're descended from warriors, and I know you believe her." Cecilia stared at him, seeing herself reflected in his eyes in a way that made her feel both terrifyingly vulnerable and impossibly strong. "How do you know about my grandmother?" "Because you whisper her words when you think no one's listening," Marcus said gently. "You are a daughter of warriors, child. Remember that." The fact that he'd noticed, that he'd been paying such close attention to her, made Cecilia's breath catch. In 3 years of captivity, no one had really seen her. She'd been invisible, ignored, treated like furniture. But Marcus saw everything. "This is crazy," she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. "Probably." Marcus reached up to touch her face, his fingers feathering across her cheek with impossible gentleness. "But I've spent 5 years building walls around my heart, and you knocked them all down in 5 minutes. If that's not love, it's something close enough to terrify me. Have you ever met someone who saw the real you when everyone else looked right through you? Tell me about that moment in the comments below. I believe everyone deserves to be truly seen." Before Cecilia could respond, Rodriguez cleared her throat from across the room. "I hate to interrupt, but we have a problem." They turned to find her holding her phone, her face grim. "That was my contact at the bureau. Someone tipped off the network about our investigation. 3 families were moved out of safe houses in the past hour, and 2 of our informants have gone missing. Marcus felt ice settle in his veins. How is that possible? Someone with access to federal intelligence databases leaked the information, Lou said grimly. This goes higher than we thought. Cecilia sank onto the sofa, the weight of the revelation crushing her brief moment of hope. They know about me. About us. They'll disappear everyone and start over somewhere else. Cecilia sank onto the sofa, the weight of the revelation crushing her brief moment of hope. They know about me. About us. They'll disappear everyone and start over somewhere else. Not if we move first, Marcus said grimly. He pulled out his phone and started dialing. I'm calling in every favor I have. Media contacts, congressional allies, international law enforcement. That could take weeks, Rodriguez protested. These people will be gone by morning. Then we don't wait for the cavalry, Cecilia said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her, and she stood slowly, her spine straightening with resolve. We go tonight, before they can move everyone. Cecilia, Marcus started. Listen to me. Her voice carried a strength that surprised even her. Right now, they think they've won. They think their leak bought them time to clean house and disappear. But they don't know about the hotel room recordings. What recordings? Rodriguez asked sharply. Cecilia looked directly at Marcus. You said you were recording Miguel when he threatened us at the diner. But what about your hotel rooms? Your properties must have security systems. Understanding dawned on Marcus's face. Every King's hotel has full audio and video surveillance in the public areas and meeting rooms. If Hendricks has ever conducted business at any of my properties, he has. Cecilia's voice was certain. He meets with his business associates at the Meridian's restaurant every Tuesday night. He thinks it makes him look legitimate, eating at the fanciest place in town. Rodriguez was already pulling up surveillance archives on her tablet. If we can get recordings of him discussing the trafficking operation, we'd have everything we need for federal charges, Lou finished. Conspiracy, racketeering, trafficking in persons. Marcus was already calling his head of security. I need every surveillance file from the Meridian restaurant for the past 6 months. Everything. Audio, video, facial recognition matches. Yes, I know it's late. Wake up whoever you need to wake up. As Marcus coordinated with his security team, Cecilia felt a familiar knot of fear forming in her stomach. They were so close to something that could change everything, but she knew better than to hope too much. In her experience, the moment you started believing things might get better was exactly when they got worse. What if it's not enough? She asked Rodriguez quietly. What if the recordings don't show anything useful? Then we try something else, Rodriguez said firmly. But Cecilia, you need to understand. Once we move on this, there's no going back. These people will know you're the one who brought them down. Are you prepared for that? Cecilia thought about the other girls, the ones whose photos filled Rodriguez's files. She thought about the children who were being sold and used and broken by people who saw them as nothing more than profitable commodities. She thought about her grandmother's voice. You are a daughter of warriors, child. I've been preparing for this my whole life, she said. I just didn't know it. Marcus ended his call and turned back to them, his expression grim. We have a problem. My security chief says someone accessed the surveillance files remotely about an hour ago. The same files we need. The leak, Lou said grimly. They're already covering their tracks. Not all of them. Marcus's smile was sharp as a blade. They got the restaurant files, but they don't know about the private meeting rooms. I have Hendricks on camera from 3 weeks ago, in a closed-door session with someone who was supposed to be discussing a legitimate catering contract. He pulled up the footage on his tablet, and they all leaned in to watch. The video showed Hendricks in one of the Meridian's executive conference rooms, sitting across from a man Cecilia recognized with a jolt of terror. That's Carlos Vega, she whispered. He's the one who runs the whole operation. Ricardo and Miguel work for him. On screen, They could see Vega sliding a briefcase across the table to Hendricks while speaking in rapid Spanish. Marcus's security system had captured every word. "Can you translate?" Rodriguez asked Cecilia. Cecilia listened to the recorded conversation, her face growing pale. "He's talking about a shipment coming in next week. 23 people, including 8 children. He's giving Hendricks money to place them in suitable households throughout the state." "Suitable households," Lou repeated grimly. "Houses where they'll be enslaved." "The shipment," Rodriguez said urgently. "When? Where?" Cecilia listened to more of the recording. "Tomorrow night. Hudson Port, Warehouse 7. Vega says the cargo ship will arrive at 11 p.m. Marcus was already dialing again. "I'm calling the Coast Guard, FBI, everyone." "Wait." Rodriguez grabbed his arm. "If we alert too many agencies, the leak will warn them again. We need a smaller team, people we can trust absolutely." "How small?" "Just us," Cecilia said quietly. "And maybe a few of Marcus's security people. People who work directly for him, not through any government agency." They all stared at her. "Cecilia," Marcus said carefully, "what exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we stop them ourselves," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Tomorrow night, when they think they're safe, we gather evidence of the trafficking operation in action. Get it all on camera, document everything, then call in law enforcement after we have proof they can't make disappear." "That's incredibly dangerous," Rodriguez warned. "If they catch us, then we'd better not get caught." Cecilia looked around the room at these people who had become her unlikely allies. They've been winning because they operate in shadows, because no one with power has been willing to shine a light on what they do. But Marcus has power. Real power. And I know their methods, their security, their weaknesses. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, and Cecilia could see him weighing risk against reward, safety against justice. Finally, he nodded slowly. "We'll need a plan," he said. "A real plan, not just good intentions and righteous anger." "I can get us inside," Cecilia said. "There's a maintenance entrance on the south side of Warehouse 7. The lock is broken, has been for months. And I know the guard rotation schedule." "How do you know all this?" Lou asked. Cecilia's voice grew quiet. "Because that's where they brought me when I first arrived. 3 years ago, I spent 2 days in that warehouse before Hendricks took possession of me. I memorized every detail, every way in and out, every hiding place. I told myself someday I'd escape, and I'd need to know how." The room fell silent as the full weight of what she was saying sank in. Marcus reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "You don't have to go back there," he said gently. "We can find another way." "No." Cecilia squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his touch. "We can't. This is the only chance we'll have to catch them in the act, to get evidence that can't be dismissed or covered up." "But Marcus," she turned to face him fully, "I need you to promise me something. Anything. If something goes wrong, if they catch us, don't try to be a hero. Don't sacrifice yourself for me. These people are monsters, and they won't hesitate to kill anyone who threatens them." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I'm not leaving you. And I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to be smart. We're stronger together, but only if we both survive." Before Marcus could respond, Rodriguez's phone buzzed with an urgent message. She read it quickly, her face going white. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "ICE just raided 3 safe houses in the city," Rodriguez said grimly. "They arrested 47 undocumented immigrants and turned them over to private transportation services for deportation." "Let me guess," Cecilia said bitterly. "The transportation services are run by Vega's people." "Probably. Which means those 47 people just got delivered right back to their traffickers." Rodriguez stood and began gathering her files. "This operation is bigger and more connected than we thought. If we're going to move, it has to be tomorrow night. After that, they'll relocate everything and we'll lose our chance." Marcus looked at Cecilia, seeing the determination in her dark eyes, the set of her jaw that reminded him of warriors preparing for battle. She was magnificent and terrifying, and absolutely committed to this fight, even if it killed her. "Okay," he said finally. "Tomorrow night we end this." As if summoned by his words, the hotel's fire alarm began blaring through the building. Within seconds, Marcus's head of security was calling his phone. "Sir, we have a problem," the man said tersely. "Someone just set fires on the 3rd, 7th, and 15th floors. The building's evacuating, but it looks like a coordinated attack." Marcus grabbed Cecilia's hand and pulled her toward the emergency stairwell. "They found us," he said grimly. "So much for waiting until tomorrow night." As they ran down the stairs with Rodriguez and Lou, Cecilia could hear shouts and gunfire echoing from somewhere below. The traffickers had come for her, and they'd brought enough firepower to level the building if necessary. "Marcus," she said as they reached the 10th floor landing, "I think we're about to find out just how far they're willing to go to keep their secrets." Above them, the sound of boots on metal stairs echoed ominously. They were being hunted, and the hunters were closing in fast. The gunfire grew closer as they descended, but Marcus's security training kicked in. He'd insisted on learning tactical response after Elena's death. One more way to never feel powerless again. At the 8th floor, he pulled them into a service corridor. "There's a freight elevator that connects to the parking garage," he whispered, leading them through a maze of utility rooms. "If we can reach my car." "Sir." Marcus's earpiece crackled with his security chief's voice. "Buildings surrounded. At least 12 vehicles, heavily armed. But we've got eyes on their command post, black SUV, north side of the building." Rodriguez was coordinating with her backup team through her phone. "FBI's 10 minutes out, but these guys aren't waiting around for federal cavalry." They reached the freight elevator, just as the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. In the distance, they could hear systematic door-to-door searches beginning on the upper floors. "They're not just trying to grab me," Cecilia realized. "They're trying to eliminate everyone who knows about tomorrow night's shipment." Marcus pulled her closer as the elevator descended with agonizing slowness. "Which means we're the only ones who can stop it now." The garage level opened to reveal Marcus's armored Mercedes idling near the exit, his driver James ready for immediate departure. But between them and the car, 3 armed men in tactical gear were systematically checking vehicles. "Back exit," Marcus whispered, but Rodriguez shook her head. "Already covered. I count at least 6 shooters in the garage." That's when Cecilia surprised them all. Instead of cowering or planning another escape route, she stood straighter and pulled out her phone. "What are you doing?" Marcus hissed. "Ending this." She dialed a number from memory. When it connected, she spoke clearly in Spanish. "Carlos. It's Cecilia Williams." "Yes, I know you're looking for me. I want to make a deal." Marcus grabbed for the phone, but she stepped away, her eyes fierce with determination. "I'll trade myself for the 23 people coming in tomorrow night," she continued. "Meet me at Warehouse 7 in 1 hour. Come alone, and I'll surrender quietly. No more running, no more hiding." She ended the call and turned to face 3 shocked faces. "Have you lost your mind?" Marcus demanded. "No, I've found it." Cecilia's voice was calm, certain. Vega's ego won't let him pass up the chance to personally recapture the girl who caused him so much trouble. He'll come, and when he does, we'll be ready for him. "That's suicide," Rodriguez protested. "No, it's justice." Cecilia looked at Marcus, and he saw something blazing in her dark eyes that took his breath away. "You said I was brave for fighting back against Hendricks. But that was just survival. This is courage." Marcus stared at her, seeing not the broken victim he'd found on a bus bench, but a warrior preparing for battle. She was magnificent and terrifying, and absolutely committed to saving others, even at the cost of her own life. "If we're doing this," he said finally, We're doing it right. Full surveillance, backup teams, and enough firepower to level half the port if necessary. Rodriguez was already coordinating with her FBI contacts. I can have a tactical team positioned around the warehouse in 40 minutes. Full digital surveillance, snipers, the works. And I'll have my private security team running interference, Marcus added. Anyone who wants to get to you goes through them first. Cecilia felt tears threatening for the first time since childhood. These people, these amazing, brave people, were willing to risk everything to help her save others. After 3 years of believing she was worthless, disposable, she finally understood her true value. When have you discovered that your greatest strength came from your deepest pain? Share your story below. Your courage might be exactly what someone needs to hear today. An hour later, Warehouse 7 sat like a concrete monument to human misery on the Hudson docks. Fog rolled in from the bay, providing perfect cover for the federal agents and private security teams positioned around the building's perimeter. Marcus wore a tactical vest under his suit jacket and carried enough communication equipment to coordinate a small war. Cecilia stood at the broken maintenance entrance she'd described, her heart hammering, but her resolve steady. Through her earpiece, she could hear Rodriguez coordinating with the FBI tactical team. All units in position, Rodriguez's voice crackled. Target vehicle approaching from the east. A black limousine pulled up to the warehouse's main entrance, and Carlos Vega stepped out alone as promised. He was exactly as Cecilia remembered, tall, expensively dressed, with dead eyes that had looked at her 3 years ago like she was merchandise to be appraised. "He's here," she whispered into her microphone. "We see him." Marcus's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "Remember, you get him talking, get evidence of the trafficking operation, then we move in." Cecilia entered the warehouse through the maintenance door, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. It looked exactly as she remembered. Rows of shipping containers, some converted into makeshift holding cells, others storing the inventory, that made this operation so profitable. "Cecilia," Vega's voice echoed through the space. "My dear girl, you've caused me so much trouble." She emerged from the shadows to find him standing in the center of the warehouse, arms spread wide like he was welcoming her home. The sight of him in this place, surrounded by the machinery of human suffering, filled her with a rage so pure it felt like power. "I'm here," she said simply. "Let the others go." Vega laughed, the same sound that had haunted her nightmares for 3 years. "Others? What others? The cargo arriving tonight belongs to me, just like you do. I don't belong to anyone anymore. Is that what your rich boyfriend told you?" Vega began walking toward her, his movements predatory. "Did he promise to save you? To make you legitimate? You're nothing, girl. You're a product, and products don't get to choose their owners." Through her earpiece, Cecilia could hear Marcus's breathing growing ragged with fury. She needed to keep Vega talking, get him to admit to the trafficking operation, while the surveillance equipment captured every word. "The 23 people coming tonight," she said. "Children, families. How can you do that to innocent people?" "Innocent?" Vega stopped a few feet away, his smile cold as winter. "There's no such thing as innocent, only profitable and unprofitable. These people were dying in poverty in their home countries. I gave them purpose, value. I turned their suffering into something useful. You turned them into slaves. I turned them into commodities. There's a difference." Vega pulled out his phone and showed her a series of photographs, men, women, children, all with price tags attached. "Tonight's cargo is worth $3 million on the current market. The children alone will bring in." The warehouse lights blazed to life as FBI tactical teams stormed through every entrance simultaneously. Red laser dots danced across Vega's chest as 24 agents surrounded him with military precision. "FBI! Hands where we can see them." Vega's face went white as he realized he'd walked into a perfectly orchestrated trap. His eyes found Cecilia, who was already backing away toward Marcus, who had appeared at her side like an avenging angel. "You think this changes anything?" Vega snarled as agents zip-tied his hands behind his back. "I have lawyers, connections, politicians in my pocket. I'll be out in 24 hours. "Not this time," Marcus said quietly, stepping forward with a tablet in his hands. "Agent Rodriguez, would you like to show Mr. Vega what we found when we executed search warrants on his associates?" Rodriguez smiled grimly as she approached with her own tablet. "Mr. Vega, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit human trafficking, racketeering, money laundering, and about 15 other federal charges. But more importantly, your entire network just got rolled up. Judge Clearwater, Representative Torres, Immigration Officer Chen, they're all in custody as we speak." Vega's confident facade cracked completely. "That's impossible. You don't have evidence." "We have bank records, communications, surveillance footage, and testimony from over 40 victims," Marcus interrupted. "But most importantly, we have your confession from 10 minutes ago, recorded in 4K video with perfect audio." As federal agents led Vega away, Cecilia felt something she'd never experienced before: the weight of justice being served. The monster who had destroyed so many lives was finally facing consequences for his actions. "The cargo ship?" she asked Rodriguez. "Coast Guard intercepted it an hour ago. 23 victims are safe and receiving medical care. ICE has been ordered to treat them as trafficking victims, not deportation targets." Rodriguez's smile was fierce with satisfaction. "Thanks to your courage, they'll have a chance to rebuild their lives." 3 months later, Cecilia stood in the federal courthouse wearing a navy blue dress that Marcus had helped her pick out, not because she couldn't choose for herself, but because he'd wanted to be part of preparing for this moment. Today, she would testify at Carlos Vega's sentencing hearing, the final chapter in a legal process that had dismantled one of the largest trafficking networks in the country. The months since the warehouse raid had been a whirlwind of depositions, interviews, and legal proceedings. But they'd also been filled with healing, growth, and the slow, careful development of something Cecilia had never thought she'd have: a real relationship built on trust and equality. Marcus had used his connections to fast-track her application for AT-1 visa, the special immigration status reserved for trafficking victims. But more than that, he'd helped her find her voice, her strength, her place in a world that had tried to tell her she didn't deserve to exist. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked as they walked up the courthouse steps together. "Free," Cecilia said simply. "For the first time in my life, I feel completely free." Inside the courtroom, she faced Vega one last time. He looked smaller now, diminished by orange prison clothes and the weight of a 40-year sentence. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong, carrying the power of every victim who had found the courage to fight back. "You told me I was nothing," she said, looking directly at him. "You said I was just a product to be bought and sold. But you were wrong. I am Cecilia Williams, daughter of Trinidad, granddaughter of warriors. I am a survivor, a fighter, and a free woman. And because I refused to accept your definition of my worth, 47 other people are free today too." Judge Harrison sentenced Vega to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the gavel fell, Cecilia felt the last chains of her past finally break. Outside the courthouse, Marcus took her hand as reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed. She was no longer afraid of being seen, no longer worried about who might be watching. The girl who had been invisible for 3 years had become a voice for justice. "What now?" she asked as they walked toward the car. "Now we live," Marcus said simply. "We build something beautiful together. We help other survivors find their voices. We make sure this never happens to anyone else. And us? What are we?" Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "We're whatever you want us to be. I love you, Cecilia. Not because I saved you, not because you need me, but because you're the strongest, bravest, most magnificent woman I've ever known. If you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you deserve every happiness this world can offer." Cecilia looked at this man who had seen her at her lowest point and helped her discover her highest potential. Marcus Kings, the King of Hudson, who had learned that real power came not from controlling others, but from empowering them to control their own destinies. "I love you too," she said, standing on her toes to kiss him. "And I want to build something beautiful with you." As they drove away from the courthouse, Cecilia thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days ago, she had been trafficked into a nightmare. But today, she was driving toward a future filled with love, purpose, and the kind of freedom she'd never dared to dream possible. Her phone buzzed with a text from Detective Rodriguez. 23 trafficking victims from the ship got their T visas approved today. They're all being placed with legitimate social services. "You did this, Cecilia. You saved them all." Marcus reached over and squeezed her hand. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about my grandmother," Cecilia said softly. "She used to tell me that warriors aren't made in battle. They're revealed by it." I finally understand what she meant. Which is, I was always strong enough to fight back. I just needed to believe I was worth fighting for. Marcus brought her hand to his lips and kissed her fingers gently. "You are worth everything, Cecilia Williams. Everything and more." As their car merged into Hudson's evening traffic, Cecilia watched the city lights begin to twinkle in the growing darkness. Somewhere out there, other victims were still trapped, still waiting for someone to care enough to fight for them. Tomorrow, she and Marcus would continue that fight through the foundation they were establishing. The Elena King Center for Trafficking Survivors, named for Marcus's sister and dedicated to the proposition that every human being deserved dignity, freedom, and the chance to write their own story. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, Cecilia Williams was going home with someone who loved her exactly as she was. The broken chains of her past had become the foundation for a future built on justice, love, and the unshakable belief that no one, absolutely no one, was beyond saving.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.